Well, the girls want me to talk. We have one man and Larry. I said, no, two. All right, don't get all in your thing there. You know why you're here, because you can drive at night. That's the only reason. You didn't want to come. This man, he's like, what am I doing here? Why? Why did she drag me? Really? Is that true? It's really true. Really? You know, one of the only men in America. Can't even get my husband to read my book. I know. You like to read good books, right? I do too. All right.
You want to talk?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure. You gonna introduce me?
Yes.
All right.
That'll be the last word I get.
Oh, okay. Now you're a comedian. We've known each other forever.
Patrick, are we on?
We are on.
Oh.
Are we live? Now, where is this going?
Is her mic working?
Not really. I don't think it's working. Girls, come on now. I do though. Then I'll have laryngitis tomorrow. Is that on? It's on. It's green. And what's that for? Is it live streaming?
Live stream on Facebook and YouTube.
Is it right now? I got to be careful then. I don't like that situation right there. Well, because. Okay, sorry, Larry.
That's okay.
I'm behaving now. Okay, go ahead.
Want some water? Okay.
Yeah,
Good evening. Welcome to the Poison Pen. And I'm not Barbara Peters, in case anyone.
Now that's funny.
Thank you. She's enjoying holiday in the South Pacific somewhere. I did want to change with her, but she wouldn't go for that. So we're here. Because we're here with Adriana Trigiani. I was going to say an old friend, but I'll just say
I'm an old friend.
Okay.
I'm a friend, and I'm old. It's an old friendship.
Okay. A New York Times best-selling author. Her books have been published in 38 different languages, 6 of which she speaks fluently.
Oh, hey, Larry, that's good.
She's an award-winning playwright, television writer, producer, filmmaker. She co-founded the Origin Project, inspiring students to find their voices through writing in the Appalachia. And she's also on the New York State Council of the Arts. And of course, she's the MC at annual Arizona Women's Board Authors Luncheon.
Of which most of them are here.
Yeah.
Many of the girls that attend and work the event.
Okay. And I'll just introduce you, and you can just talk.
And then I go right, you know, does that make you nervous? That just makes me a little nervous, that camera.
No, I'm good with it.
Are you? Thank you, Larry. You know I adore you.
No.
You're the best. Since Barnes & Noble.
Yes, exactly. So,
yeah.
Before we get into the book, because I know that's why people are here, you wear so many hats.
Yeah.
And to accomplish so much, you have 20 books, and movies, television shows, and you're a mother.
That's right, I'm a mother.
So how do you do that? Do you schedule yourself, or you just wing it?
Well, my daughter went to college, and that was a revelation, because I cried, of course, you know, you do. But then, after I stopped crying and she was happy at college, I found that it was as if I was starting over again. So I always look at everything, including what I'm committed to do. I do it, and then I start over again. So I never feel like I've gotten where I'm supposed to be, because I'm always starting over again. But it's a good thing. It's like how I scare myself.
So you're not really multitasking. You're doing one project at a time.
You know, women do that naturally. Women, I don't know. Every woman in this room knows what I'm talking about. We can talk on the phone, make dinner, do laundry, and add and subtract. You know, balance our checkbooks at the same time. This is something we can do. And men find that very hard to understand. Like, are you doing any of it well? We do all of it better than anybody could do if they just did one thing at a time. So that's kind of my That's kind of how I do it.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't do everything all at once. Say if I'm writing a book or I'm directing a movie, they're all separate. You kind of get to and start over again.
Good.
It works out.
Now we can talk about the book.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, The Good Left Undone.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
What's,
Well, it's exactly, I mean, you asked a perfect opening question for what the book's about. The book is, is about history and in your family. And that women are the keepers of the history. Now, in a larger sense, history as a conversation of the world, we're left out of it. 50% of the history that we made was not reported. That's not good. So I try to mind that and say, okay, and honor the women in my line, and hopefully your lines and your families, by writing these stories. Everybody does it differently, but I don't know about you, but I think about my mother every day. My mother's always a part of my day. And by extension, my grandmother's. And I don't find it sad anymore. I mean, you always miss them and you have that longing. But then you go through your memory of what the wisdom you learned from them. And so I started this book with the idea that a woman is at a point in her life, she knows she doesn't have a lot of time left. And she thinks she's done a bad job of telling the family story. For example, her granddaughter, who's getting married, doesn't know that her great-grandmother was a nurse.
mm-hmm.
Now, that's a very simple fact to have gotten lost, right? But it got lost. So when things get lost, we have to figure out how to make them whole again and written in history. Because if we don't do it, nobody else will. So I do it in a novel, hoping that even in the fact that it's fiction with factual information rooted within it, will have you look at what you need to look at in your own family and leave it behind. There are simple things that we can do. For example, who's getting your jewelry? Okay? Now, do you know most women die without telling who's getting what? Which leaves a terrible situation. I know, look at you two. There was a fight. I could see there was a big fight. There was a fight. Somebody didn't get the pearls. Somebody didn't get them. And also, grief works on everybody differently. See, there's some people that go, I don't want anything. I always laugh at those people. Yeah, give yourself 2 weeks. You'll be back. Or, I really wanted that, but I didn't have the voice to ask for it. So you only need one thing to remember people by, right? You need one thing. You don't need a million things. You need one thing. So if you can be happy knowing you have one thing to remind you of that person, you're rich. You don't need it all. How many people fight over dishes? Or silver, or don't want any of it. That always alarms me. You don't want anything? No. Photographs. These are things, now, and in your own family, you can make it really clear. I've already started writing on stuff. This was given to me by my aunt when I did this. So that it's not lost. Now, I can tell you a funny story because my mother wore a lot of jewelry. My mother was a jewelry person. She was very elegant and beautiful. And she mixed them. She'd get some stuff was fake and some, real. Father got her some really nice things. And when a tornado went through Big Stone Gap, my mother survived it just fine. And we came home, all the kids, and helped her clean up the house and stuff. And when everybody left, I was alone with her. And I realized I was like 42 and I'd never been alone with my mother. I know, it's hilarious. It's true. Because when you're in a big family, your mother is never alone. And there was, of course, my father, who was the king of all kings, right? So she took care of all of that. And I realized when I was alone with her, you know, she said, well, what do you want to do? We kind of looked at each other like zoo animals, like, well, we've never been here before. And I said, let's go through your jewelry, which is fun. And my mother had one of those freestanding jewelry things, you know, that you open up and everything's hanging there and everything. And in that jewelry case, you know, I had snooped my whole life and gone in and tried things. And, you know, as soon as she'd leave the house, I go in there and put some rings on and things, you know, put them back before she got home. And those things were, to me, out of my league. You know, I just thought, well, I'll never get those, so I'm not going to worry about it. She had something that I really wanted. And I never asked for anything. I never asked her for anything. I'm so glad I got this. But it's my daughter's named for her mother, for my mother's mother. And in that line of the family, there's a relic. There was a relic from Italy, which they used to bring out when people got sick. So I wanted it. Now, my mother, who was a librarian, was typically not decisive. Took her a long time to make decisions. But that day, I practically wrestled her to the ground to get that thing. And I said, look, you have to put a note in this. I can't decide today, she said to me. I said, look. And I just leveled with her. She put the note in, and when she died, I got it. But I'm saying this to you, not because I got the relic, but if there's something you really want or wanted, you should have it to remember them. Now, they're gone. We can't bring them back, but you could do it for your kid some way. So that's the first kind of, I tapped that in this book, because this is a family that prior to World War II were gem cutters for the Vatican. Now, that sounds like you're going to make a lot of money doing that, but you don't own the stones. You are commissioned. You sell your skill. So then after you sell your skill, you get whatever's left over. Well, after World War II, this same family that was in the jewelry business and could cut stone went into business for themselves, and they became quite prosperous. And it's a fact that when families get rich, they become less interested in the family stories and less interested in the family and more interested in profit. So what happens to the family? That was very interesting to me. How could I write about that? How do you encourage your family to be successful and at the same time keep them moral, ethical, focused on each other? So the rich, and I realize that it's a prejudice against rich people that I have to take care of. I know, that's okay. You look it. Anyway, my point is that you have to decide what the most important thing is, not the dictates of the prophet or any of that stuff. The other part of this that was really interesting to me was that she was in a good marriage. She was in a good marriage, but there was a toll being taken here. I'm talking about Matilda. In telling the family story, you find out stuff. It's like it peels like an onion. It's very understandable. You know, I was talking to Mitch Albom about this today we did a thing, a Q&A thing, he was so good. When you have the present that goes into the past, it can get a little, you go, I can't take this. Not this story, because the continuum of the contemporary storyline is always, she's aiming to tell you in chronological order the story of the mother. Mm-hmm. So it isn't one of those time travel numbers. It's not like that. But you do go back in time. So when I started out to write this, okay, that was my story. Gem cutters from the Vatican, prosperous after World War II. That's kind of it. But that's not really a novel. I mean, it's good. I could probably sell it, you know what I mean, to myself, to work on it for a few years, but So when I got this job to go to Scotland, I had accidents start happening when you're writing a book. And if you pay attention to the accidents, you're going to end up with something really good. So the first accident was I was in Scotland, and I had a free weekend before kind of everybody got there. So I made a list of places I wanted to see in Glasgow. So I started with St. Andrew's Cathedral. This is an A. Listen, I'm not that. So I walked over there. I went on foot, and there was a wedding happening. So the first sign was, I was standing in the back of the church. I am a wedding crasher because they tell us it's good luck. I heard that my whole life. It's good luck to see a bride on her wedding day. And so I have a phone full of people I don't know and their weddings. I take pictures. Oh, I got it too, And they're like, who is this stranger taking pictures? But I like it. I don't know. It's just my thing. So I'm in the back of the church, and it's me and the bagpiper. He's in a kilt. And I realized as the mass goes on that it's every song my mother chose for her funeral. So I felt my mother speaking to me, and I said, something's happening here, something's happening. So I start crying. The first thing I learned about Scottish men is they do not like when you cry. They do not like criers, and he just sort of moved away, like got away from me. So then, mass goes on, it's over, the bride's about to come out. I go outside and I start taking pictures, and behind me, as I'm actually doing a video of the whole thing, and a man says, "Who are you?" to me. And I turned around, and it was a priest who just married them. I said, "Oh, Father, I'm just a tourist." And then I went back to taking pictures. And then he said to me, "Are you Italian?" And I said, "Yes, Italian American. What's your name?" I told him. He said, "You need to see that garden." I mean, it's that simple. Go look at the garden. So I took a few more pictures, and I went over to the garden gate. I got inside. I really couldn't figure out what it was. It was modern things, and then in Italian, like sayings of the great Greek philosophers. It wasn't religious. Thought that was weird. You're next to a church. Why isn't it religious? Wasn't. And then I went around the outskirts, and then there was a plinth on a wall, and it said, "For the victims of the Arandora Star, the Italian Scots who perished on the Arandora Star, July 2nd, 1940. Well, I never heard of this. I never heard, what was the Arandora Star? So quickly made some notes, and instead of going on with my day, I went back to the hotel. I called my researcher, and we started working on it. And here's what I found out. Now, here's what's great. I wanted to write a story about immigrants. Immigrants. Like your people. So, because when I was growing up, immigrant was a word of honor in our home. It was a word of honor. And somewhere along the way, it wasn't. And it's bothered me. Because I was always very proud of my immigrant family. I know you are of yours. Okay? So, to write a story about immigration right now is like throwing gas on yourself and setting yourself on fire, because people are just going to go, "You're not an immigrant, you didn't," except we all are, right? So this story was sort of perfect because it wasn't about my people per se or the current situation in America. It wasn't about that. 4 years later, after all the research, one of the things I learned was that the plight of the immigrant never changes in history. That knock is going to come at the door to round you up, and you better be ready. You're never really accepted. And you say, "Oh, what a terrible thing to say, Adriana. That's horrible," but it's true. Now, as the generations drone on, it changes a bit. But when you lose that, you also lose the honor. So you become assimilated and a part of something, but then you lose the core of it. So I thought, now that's a novel. That's good. And then I had the perfect story in the Arandora Star. So let me tell you quickly what it is. It won't ruin the read for you at all. World War II had many false starts, particularly in Europe, in a lot of different ways. But the big one was England and Winston Churchill. I cut 300 pages of him out of here. I know. It's another book. But after I did that, this was the luxury of this pandemic, is I had the time to really look at this and say, okay, I'm going to take this out. Does it work without it? You'll see, it does. So the other thing I learned with Winston Churchill in this particular situation is great leaders make dumb mistakes. The greatest of leaders sometimes just make a stupid mistake. So here's what happened. And there's two elements to this. It's fascinating and applies to us today. The first of which, Churchill was, it's an island that's his country, is an island, and in war, the first thing that is vulnerable are the borders where there's water. Okay? And in this book, it's Viareggio in Italy, because it's on that Mediterranean coast. And in England, it's all the way around. But now, Churchill started right away to shore up all forms of communication, and he requisitioned every boat and ship, including the luxury liners. And the luxury liners, including the Arendora Star, were big enough to haul prisoners. Normally, it's like the ballrooms and the elegant and wealthy traveled the world and go to the exotic locales of the world. Well, now they requisition them. So Churchill was a guy who loved to travel and paint. He was a painter. And he loved Italians and he loved Italy till he didn't. I didn't know that there were Italian Scots. Did anybody, do you know that there are Italian Scots? You did? I wasn't aware, but the truth is that no matter what your nationality is, your people emigrated to other places, not just America. See, I thought we came here and that kind of it. I mean, I didn't think just here, but I thought South America, maybe Canada, right? But no, it's bigger than that, more broad-based than that. Okay. What contributed to the roundup was this. On June 10th, 1940, Mussolini declared war on England and allied himself with the Nazis. Okay? So you had people that were from Italy but were now English citizens, but they were Italian. Now, there was no resistance to the roundup by the men because these guys were their friends, the Irish, the Scots, and the English. These were not people that disliked each other. They had, for a few generations, some intermarried. So it really shouldn't have been a problem, right? It should have been. But Churchill was afraid, and he didn't know what to do because there was a thing called the fifth column where secrets are leaked, and he was very, very scared of that. Now, you might say, well, now, wait a minute, but he liked them, and they all got along, and so why would you get rid of them? Why would you round up the men? Well, it was very simple. He felt that he had no recourse. And the Italians themselves, in their new country of 2 or 3 generations, felt Italian, which is what we hope for, right? That we're going to love our mother, and then we're going to love where we are, okay? So the scene was sort of set for what happened next. Leading up to the June 10th announcement by Mussolini, for several years, there's propaganda in the newspapers against Italians in England. I paid a few $1,000s for one of them because I wanted to show you. There's many, many, many more, but I paid for one in there. And it's how the subtle use gnawed away at people's sense of loyalty and honor by denigrating this one group of people. And the accusations were they're going to take our jobs. They're crooks, they're thieves, they're gamblers, they're dirty, they're brown, they're Italian. Okay, so it all sounds familiar now, right? It's ringing bells. But the climate was right for him to do what he did. So they round him up. The guys go peacefully to this mill. Now they think they're going for a day. So they wore their best clothes, these Italian men, from age 11 to 80. They put on their Sunday suits, Sunday shoes, you know, you had one pair, hat, and the wives packed the parcels for them, which would have a change of underwear, socks, and a shirt, and then food. Salami, you know, cheese, a couple of loaves, but you know how we eat, wine. And they rounded them up and brought them to a mill and eventually put them aboard the Arendora Star, which was one of the 4 luxury liners that were requisitioned out of Liverpool. They put the Italians in the bottom, 734 of them to start with, and there were actual real Nazis on the second level with what they call Jewish intellectuals, professors from the schools, the major schools in the UK. The ship was wrapped in barbed wire. We were in the bottom, and then the next level were the professors and the actual Nazis, and at the top the crew. There was Hitler's finest U-boat general. Well, you know, he basically ran the fleet. A really diabolical, evil guy, Gunther Preen, and he was running. They would run these kind of test patterns at the bottom of the ocean, and they would see how far they could get. And he was around Ireland.
Right.
He had one torpedo. He aimed for the ship that was wrapped in barbed wire going to Canada. The men on board did not know that were on board, did not even know where they were going. Hits it. Of course, it sinks the ship. They lose the whole crew. But the Nazis got in the lifeboats. Nazis did fine. They survived, paddled away, and the others were left to die. And the Italians couldn't get through the barbed wire, a lot of them. Lost their lives. Some jumped, survived it. The ones that survived it were scooped up out of the ocean and put on another ship, another prison ship. Couldn't call your family. It's the most horrible. And we say, well, this is a terrible story. But that's one. There's thousands of them, thousands of these stories. History doesn't have like these broad colors, and it just doesn't. It's like nuanced, and it's deadly. So anyway, here was a man. I mean, Churchill loved the Italians. He didn't want to do it, but he felt his back was against the wall. When all these folks died, he reversed the order. But it took him 4 weeks, and by then, you had drained the country of the Italian men. They're kind of gone now. And, interestingly enough, after that happened, he never really could set it right. Couldn't set it right. And I talk to people now in Scotland that are of Italian descent, and they can list the people they lost. Now, here's the crazy part of this. That garden, you want to know how old that garden was? Barely 10 years old. It took them 70 years to even acknowledge this. So when you read, you know, history, American history, there's things happen in American history I had no idea. It's just all part of the way it's done. So now you say, well, how's that part of the novel? Well, it's the biggest part of the novel. It's the historical backdrop of the novel, is the World War II aspect to it. Because this entire story was lost in this family. Lost. They didn't even know about their Scottish grandfather. So, in setting out to do this, it's layered. But it also applies to every person sitting in this room. It's got aspects of you in it. Now, there are a couple laughs in there. You know, I like a couple laughs, Ellen. Ellen's like, it better have some plenty in there. It does. But it's almost like, you know, when you finally know about it, you kind of can't turn away from it. And you see it happening all over again right now, across the ocean. It's happening all over again. But we know about it because we're seeing it unfold. So I call this my hit by the bus book. Look, this thing is so layered, like it's like an onion. And I think that there's aspects to this book that will affect you, because I've been living with it a long time and I haven't shaken it yet. So now, Lair, we can open up for questions.
Okay, we can
You
do
want
that.
to?
Sure.
Is that fine by you?
Yeah, you've had a long day.
Does anybody have any questions? I know most of the folks here. Yes, dear.
How long did it take you to start, after you did the research, and you started writing, when you did the
The writing took 4.5 years. The first idea was 22 years ago. See, I get these ideas and I started to write them and I go, no, you got to keep layering it. And I had to learn about the gems, which, I mean, I like fakes. I'm not really a person that cares. I have friends that only want real gold. They'll only wear real gold and real gemstones. I'm not like that. I like fake. But when you learn about how they do it, here's what kills me. There's no such thing as a new diamond. Not just because it was in the earth millions of years, but because in India, these Maharajas had these necklaces and so on that the major jewelers went and bought. They'd break down the necklace. They could take one of those, like a deck of cards diamonds, and get like maybe 800 engagement rings out of them. So what's on your hand has properties. It's mysterious. I loved that part. I'm like, what weird thing is going on with that engagement ring, which might tell you a lot about your husband. But I thought that was fascinating. So I learned about that, and then I took a class in it. Also an accident. A friend of mine couldn't make it to this class at Christie's, and I took it, and I learned about it, and I was, this is incredible. And then other bits and pieces. See, it's accidental, and it's also deliberate. So when you say how much time, it feels like forever. But the actual writing, I say 4.5 years. And you'll see with this one, every sentence.
Yeah, the Washington Post in their review said that your detail was incredible and so intense that I mean, I read the book already, and it's.
Were you surprised when you read it? Interesting what a man would think.
There were a lot of things in there that I could relate to. I mean, I grew up in New York in mixed neighborhoods, and actually I worked in Little Italy 2 semesters on Arthur Avenue in the Bronx.
Sure. Across from Fordham.
Right. Yeah. And I still needed a little Italian dictionary when I read the book. Some of those phrases.
Some of the little ones, right.
But yeah, it was just a terrific book. It really was.
Thank you so much,
I couldn't put it down.
Oh, it makes me happy. He's icky picky too.
And I haven't read any of your other books, so just.
Okay. All right. Now we got to get cracking. Yes, Ellen. I have another one in the works. Yeah. It's kind of I do. I decided to go a little funny. I don't like to make a point like with what I'm doing. But then there's just common sense, logic that I do care about. Like, I don't understand this, and I still don't understand this. Maybe somebody in this room, you'll know better than me. But I don't understand how one guy can start a war and kill people willy-nilly. Does anybody, raise your hand if you don't understand. Like, maybe that's just me, but what is that? How is they allowed to run amok? And yet, then reasonable people are about, but the reasonable people, they're overruled by the kook.
The whole world feels that way. The whole world.
Yes. But I mean, we know what we know all, but this is what I'm going to talk to you about propaganda, and I'm going to talk to you about this, and I have I'm not going to make any political statements because, frankly, my own family split on stuff. I can't even, get consensus at Thanksgiving, so I'm not going to try it here, believe me. But it doesn't make sense to me that propaganda flourishes the way it does. That someone could take a stand that's absolutely false, and then it becomes true-ish, right? This is how they start wars, and we forget that we might have little machines and phones and things, but we're still people the same way people were 100 years ago. I mean, we have more, we have air conditioning, but I mean, other than that, I mean, we're the same. I learned firsthand researching this what propaganda does. It makes you look at people differently. It makes you hate people. It makes you think they're out to get you. It makes you think that they're criminals. So I did a little exercise with myself. I went out in the streets of New York, and this is like, as I was writing, and would just really look at people. Now, sometimes they were masked, but when you're outside of New York, you can stop wearing them now, but I would just look at them and I'd just go, okay, just connect to their humanity. Just connect to their humanity. Just look at them. Some people thought I was weird. I'll tell you, they would cross the street, like here she comes. But mostly what I felt was just like this affection for them. I know these people. They don't know me. But I felt something for them. So I'm thinking, what is it in us that allows nuts? And listen, most men are good. The 3 that are here are wonderful. The 4, oh, you too. The 4 that are, see, we count you. That's how rare you are at my events. The 4 of you, most are good, but then you get those particular type of personalities, and they destroy everything. So what are you going to do about that?
Lysistrata.
Oh, God. I love Lysistrata. That's when the women in the village withheld sex until the men stopped the war. Yeah, but now they have porn. So what are you going to do about that? They didn't have that in ancient Greece. So you're out of luck there, They probably did on some level, sure. But it's interesting that you say that play jumped into your head. Why didn't something else jump into your head? Like, maybe the women need to activate. Maybe they need to lead. Maybe they need to. Oh no, I'm just talking about anytime, anywhere.
Okay.
I mean, we have other weapons, don't we, besides our sexuality?
Yes. Most men almost are raised by women.
That's a good point, Larry. They have mothers.
Yeah.
Although sometimes I wonder about this one that's in power right now.
Well, I'm sure he had a mother.
He must have.
Yeah.
But the formative years were definitely.
The formative years, yeah. Interesting, though, that your mind went there. I like it. It's interesting. You're just trying to think of a way for women to make a statement, right? Against that, right?
Why historically have men in general always ruled? You really have to take a look at it.
That's a good point. She said, why in general, in all of history, have men just naturally ruled? Why? We have to take a look at it. Why haven't women led?
Why is it so rare to have?
Well, the stories are there that the women did lead. They're not written down. Yep, they're not written down. Yes, there are some societies, but it's not part of your education. You have to dig for that stuff. You shouldn't have to dig. You're 50% of the planet. The story should be as abundant. We would think, right?
Women's history and stories are not told against yourself that way. So in your own family, you know, because even like in my family history, I'm kind of researching and
Mm-hmm.
together. But it's interesting because everything was based on the male line. I mean, all the.
Not in my. Isn't that interesting? Not in my family. You would have to have known my grandmothers. They were both owned their own businesses, which I realize now is like, how weird was that? My grandmother Viola could drive a car. She's born in 1907, so for her to drive, and she loved cars. So for her to drive a car was a very big deal. And how did I find that out? I assumed all women drove cars back then. I didn't think, well, it was just my grandmother. But when my father died, his friends wrote and said, your grandmother drove a car none of our mothers could drive. And she drove us places, and we were very impressed that she could drive. She was 14 when she was a forelady in a sewing factory. 14. So that's her. And then on the other side of the family, the thing I'm proudest of is they could read and write, and they were immigrants. They could read and write. And my grandmother, they called her Dr. Bonicelli because she'd help people. They'd call her if they're sick, and she'd look it up. They didn't have doctors on the Iron Range of Minnesota, always. They had a doctor, but, you know, if some kid had something, she had a book, and she looked it up. She was a seamstress. Her husband was a shoemaker, so I wrote a story about that, you know, shoemaker's wife. In my family, we kind of clung to those stories. Well, I can't say we know everything, but we know more than, it's not focused on the men. It's not focused on the men.
Do you have a son?
Do I what?
Do you have a son?
I have one daughter,
Okay. And you have brothers?
2 brothers, and 4 sisters. Yeah.
And you're close to all of them.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, we are.
Depending on the day.
No, I would say that we are. Even being funny. I love my brothers and sisters, and we're like an octopus to me. I mean, we're just like all connected. And you can say anything you want to each other, which maybe is not a good thing.
Oh, yes, one of your lines in the book, in Viareggio, at the Cabrellis, one of the townspeople, whatever, there was the Cabrellis, they're always arguing. Mm-hmm. Even though they're a close-knit family, they're always arguing.
You know, that old small town thing, or even in your neighborhood thing about which family they have personalities, and the Caprellis were fighting all the time. And you learned of the feuds in the book and how they came back together, and that was also part of the story. Like who was in charge of the business, how the business got into the hands of the in-law as opposed to the son, and then what the son did. Mm-hmm. And how how they got together again. I mean, it's really interesting. Those are the kinds of things I'm interested in because that's where the power lies. Who's in charge? And it was true throughout the whole story, even if we weren't talking about the Italians or the Scots, the Irish, or whatever.
Yeah, even through a Jewish family.
Even through our Jewish family, the Speranzas. I love that story. Mm-hmm. Now that story, you're going to say, hey, is that true? Okay. I wrote it, and sometimes you write it, and then you find out it's true, you didn't know it was true. I knew of the story of the gem cutters because you'll see how it kind of unfolds. These 2 families know each other. And this Venetian gem cutter, Romeo Speranza, and his wife Agnese are Jewish, and they live in Venice. He's considered the top gem cutter for the Vatican, this man Romeo. He and his wife don't have kids. She would really like to go to America because her sister went to America and has 4 daughters, okay? And it's Shabbos, so it's Friday, and his feet are covered with dust from the gem cutting that day. And she kissed him the way his shoes look, and she said, there's a shoe black, and she tells him where to go that she's made arrangements with for him to polish the shoes. So her husband goes out, and he becomes a major character in that storyline. His name is Amos, E-M-O-S. And he's an Ethiopian, and he's living under one of the bridges. And the wife, you find out as the story goes. You'll see what I don't want to ruin it for you, and it wouldn't ruin it for you. But what I wanted to tell you was, somebody asked me in the process of editing the book are there Ethiopian Italians? And I said, yeah, it's close, Then I found out that there was an Ethiopian Italian American. I was doing a library event, and this beautiful black woman was hosting it. And she comes on and she said, we had the advanced readers editions, and she said, I'm an Ethiopian Italian American. I was like, they thought I made you up out of kind of thin air. No, I'm real. Love that part. So you see, again, the role of the immigrant. We're far along now. We feel like this is our country, right? But I bet you've woken up sometimes and gone, is it still my country? Is it still my country? That's history playing through it. And by the way, we still haven't answered the question how one nut can take over a country. Makes no sense. Is it maybe because people are good and they don't want to fight? I don't know.
They're brought up to follow the rules no matter what.
Follow the rules no matter what.
And so they have no mind of their own.
And they listen to the propaganda. That's interesting. I would like to think that I would not do that. But then when I moved to New York and I was working as an office temp, I worked in those big high-rises downtown, including the World Trade Center. And when all that happened, I thought, if the man that was the operations director on my floor, the 36th floor, had come through and said, stay in your desks, don't leave, I wouldn't have left. I would have followed the rules. That's right. Yeah. But you can't always follow the rules, especially if you want to make things better. I think you have to kind of stand up for stuff. That was a long answer to a very good question. Do we have time for another question?
Sure.
Make it a doozy. Thank you for coming out.
Where did the...
I know you're busy. Sherry, I know you're busy. I know you're busy, Norma.
The Italian Supreme Court today
Yes.
allowed children, mandated that children will have the mother and father's name.
Really?
Really?
I'm staying in the wrong hotel. I didn't read that.
We could end it with that. No more questions?
Did you guys hear what Larry said? That it was ruled today in Italy that when a baby's born, he gets the father and the mother's name. This in a country where, in my book, this is a fact, when you were born without a father, they gave you a name. You didn't take your mother's name. They made up a word.
All right.
That's how much shame was involved. Isn't that wild?
So in Spain, they have these really long names.
Oh yeah, because it's
Your parents' name.
yeah, they definitely got it from Spain. It's interesting. Yes, dear. Everybody's got two names. It's kind of nice. Then you can identify the family line.
Yeah, that's why they do it. Because if you're a Garcia in Mexico, you gotta know which Garcia. Are you Garcia Ramirez or are you Garcia Hernandez? And that's how they know who it is.
Or as your grandmother said, check his background. Remember that? You're supposed to check somebody's background. What does that even mean?
My mother said, check his wallet.
Check his wallet. You could do worse, Larry. Worse things.
Anyway, we're going to sign books now.
We're going to sign books. Thank you, and thank you everybody online for watching and your great questions. Where am I going to go, Larry? Right here?
Right here.
Okay.